Throughout the centuries, American history has been full of rich characters, and one of the most exciting periods was definitely when settlers began traveling to the Old West. Of course, the chaotic activity has been embellished over the years in John Wayne flicks and various spaghetti westerns, but the truth really isn't all that far off from what folks endured throughout the 1800s and early 1900s. These intrepid settlers had to master a medley of skills that have, unfortunately, receded into obscurity due to our contemporary lifestyle. Looking back at all they needed to survive then makes me wonder, how long would someone like me last back then? Regrettably, I'm pretty sure the answer is not as long as I'd like, but take a look at some of the necessities below to see if you'd fare any better. Were there any critical facets of life in the Old West that we've overlooked? Let us know in the comments and be sure to share with your friends. Remember to hit the like button because it helps us a lot. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and press the notification bell to not miss the upcoming interesting videos. Pack a saddlebag full of essentials. The saddlebag was the frontiersman's emergency survival kit. It contained a number of essential items such as a tinderbox for starting fires, travel-friendly food like cornbread or a canister of beans with a small pan or pot, canteen of water, maybe some whiskey, a rope, and spare ammo. With it and the knowledge that they had, one could survive any number of calamities. They also carried a small blanket roll behind their saddle seat, on the skirt of the saddle. This would consist of one blanket and a rain slicker. That would have to be enough shelter to keep them dry in warmer weather. During the winter season, if they had a spare coat, that would be added to the roll. Cowboys and others who traveled a lot would often have a larger blanket roll as well, which was kept in the chuck wagon while on trail drives. That roll usually contained all of their possessions, mostly some extra clothing, but often a couple of books and a photo of someone special would find its way into that roll as well. Share stories. Whether gathered around a campfire or sitting in a tavern, cowboys and others would share stories of places they had been and things they had seen. These tales recounted their voyages to far-flung destinations and the sights that had met their eyes. These were more than just bragging about their accomplishments. They were a way of passing on information. Embedded within were myriad lessons for weathering an array of challenges, discreetly absorbed through attentive listening. They developed a keen eye for the trail, and many would know an incredible amount of detail about trails they had never traveled. That would include information about good campsites, what the climate was like, where to refill water, and maybe even a spring to rinse off in. Sharing that information with others was a good way of helping each other out so that they could all survive. Be aware of your surroundings. Remaining vigilant to your surroundings proves imperative in any survival scenario. While Native American attacks may not have been as commonplace as the movies make them out to be, they did happen. Often the only warning you would get would be a stirring in the grass or a bird flying up out of cover. If you weren't aware of these details, you would be caught unawares. One had to keep a constant eye out for weather and wild animals as well. There are places where the weather can change rapidly, such as the Front Range of the Rocky Mountains. Within the span of an hour, clear skies could yield to a fierce tempest due to cloud formations obscured by the mountains. With that short of lead time, you could be trapped if you aren't keeping a keen eye out for incoming weather. Always be armed. The Wild West was a dangerous place. When one was outside of town, there were countless things that could kill you in an instant, so it was necessary to be ready to defend yourself. Mountain lions and bears weren't afraid to attack a man if they had a chance, and some Indian tribes were almost constantly on the warpath. Even the horse and cattle they worked with were dangerous. Many settlers in the West were Civil War veterans, well acquainted with firearms and resolute in the face of peril. They confronted danger unflinchingly, whether from marauding indigenous groups or forest conflagrations. Firearms were tools employed to safeguard oneself. Within town limits, sidearms and rifles were seldom seen. Numerous municipalities enacted ordinances mandating the relinquishment of gun belts upon entering town. While the guns were necessary in the mountains and prairies, sidearms could cause problems in town. The request to lay down arms while in town aimed to avert potential conflicts. However, if they didn't want to lay them down, they were always welcome to leave. Stockpile constantly. We tend to stockpile goods only when we know we're going to be snowed in, but back in the day, it was normal for families to store goods all year round. They didn't just stockpile and then buy food to eat for that week. They ate from their stockpile and constantly replenished it. They had to, so that they would have enough to get them through the winter months. This wasn't limited to food either. Firewood was harvested whenever the chance presented itself. Often it was activities like harvesting firewood that would fill the slack days between planting and harvest time. Each day bore tasks linked to securing provisions for lean times. Even during journeys, stockpiling remained a practice. Travelers kept their eye open for good tinder and would gather it when they could to keep their tinderbox full. Hunting wasn't usually undertaken as a separate activity, but rather whenever one was traveling through the country, he would keep his eyes open for game. If he happened to bag a deer or antelope on the trail home, it would add to the larder. Rely on community. Communities grew out of the need to survive. Humans soon realized early on that gathering together gave them the ability to help each other survive. While there were those in the Wild West who were loners, many sought the companionship of fellow settlers and the reassurance of being able to rely on them in times of adversity. Collaborating within a community, the Westerners learned that they could make their survival tasks easier. One could concentrate on specific needs, in the knowledge that others would be taking care of different needs. They engaged in various forms of resource sharing, including bartering, or even outright selling to ensure their collective well-being. Remember, sheriffs weren't always trustworthy. During those times, individuals varied in their moral character, with some aligning themselves with outlaw gangs while others lacked proper training and skills. In the face of ruthless adversaries, every person, regardless of age or gender, had to fend for themselves. That meant learning how to either outsmart or outshoot the criminals, like Jesse James and Wyatt Earp, who were known to engage in both criminal activities and political pursuits. A wild horse could and should be tamed. They couldn't exactly go to the used horse lot and lease a low-mileage steed. The ability to effectively handle the horses they had was an absolute requirement. That meant taking unruly horses and letting them know who's the boss, something I definitely wouldn't have had the guts to attempt. Help each other out. Living in hardship, the people of the West were quick to help each other out. Whenever a family faced adversity, neighbors would swiftly come together to offer assistance. It didn't matter whether it was the loss of a family member or the construction of a new barn, the community rallied to lend a helping hand. This spirit of mutual aid extended across all social strata. A transient traveler passing through could always rely on a warm meal and a place to sleep, even if the sleeping arrangements were as basic as a hayloft. Travelers would often pay for this kindness by doing some chores around the homestead, but that was not necessarily expected of them. Those who did were doing so voluntarily. In this regard, the Old West differed somewhat from the modern prepping movement. Nowadays, we often prioritize the well-being of our own families, a prudent choice given the impossibility of stockpiling enough resources for an entire neighborhood. But at the same time, a day may come where we need to extend a hand to those who haven't prepared. In doing so, we will be following in the footsteps of those who settled the land before us. Did we miss an essential survival tip from old cowpokes? Let us know below and be sure to share with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and press the notification bell to not miss the upcoming interesting videos. Thanks for watching.